Hi, Thomas from fieldtennis.net here. You ever wonder why your balls land short? You may be trying to hit harder or just trying to hit longer, and yet for some reason you see that your opponent is still dictating the play and making you run around, which means that your balls are not that deep. So today we're going to look at two reasons why that might happen. And the first one is the problem of depth perception, and the second one is that you may not really fully trust gravity. Nice. So when you play tennis and you're trying to play the ball deep, there's very little time between the ball bouncing and your opponent hitting the shot. So we're talking tenths of a second. And so even though one of my previous shots was over the service line, my friend Mark was able to stretch me. So obviously my ball was not deep enough, but it's very hard to see that. And so I want to show you why it's hard to see that. So first point is that first is very little time, and the second one is the problem of depth perception. So now that we have more time to observe where the ball is, we've placed the ball down, we can firstly see that the ball is over the service line, which suggests it's fairly deep, but it's not that deep. So more experienced players will quickly pick that up, but not so experienced players will feel that the ball is fairly deep. Now, the problem in perception is that from this perspective, from our perspective, we see very little space between the ball and the baseline. So it's like, if I do it with fingers, it's like just a few millimeters, like half a centimeter. And so it's very hard in our mind to, push into that space. Like, okay, I have, half a centimeter more space and I need to push the ball deeper into that. And we know that if we go a little bit too long, it's going to be a point for our opponent. So I know that many times players stop trying to hit the ball deeper because they perceive very little space between the ball and baseline, and they don't want to hit too long. So in order to show where the ball really is, I'm going to pick up the camera and move it over there so that we see where the ball really is. Okay, so we're just doing a little shaky cam here to see where the ball really is. Okay, so as you can see, this ball is not really deep. So in terms of meters, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4.5 or 4 meters, good, almost 5 meters of space. And so that, 5 millimeters that you saw from that perspective actually in reality is 5 meters. And so that's what you have to keep in mind, is because of this depth perception, where you see that the ball, there's very little space between the ball and the baseline. From that perspective, in reality there's a lot of space. So that's what you have to get used to it. And so this would be a short ball that's not difficult to hit for your opponent, and maybe this is a ball you're looking for that is fairly challenging for your opponent, and it's going to neutralize your opponent or make it very risky for them to attack. And so this is the ball you're looking for, and this was the ball before, and that's the difference you have to make in order to stop your opponent from attacking and to really hit deep balls. So to show you the difference in depth perception again, we're going to take this ball, which is a really good deep ball. It's not on the baseline, it still gives you some safety, but this is let's say the last quarter of the court that really prevents your opponent from attacking or really gives them trouble. They have to hit on their eyes. So let's take a look at this ball from the other side to see how it looks from that perspective. So again, I'm just going to pick up the camera, I'll go the other side. So let's see how that looks like. Okay, so I've placed the camera just a little bit behind the baseline, So you can see from this perspective how small the ball is and how close it looks to the baseline, so almost sitting on the baseline. And so from this perspective, it would look quite scary to play there, but you have to know from the previous clip or from previous perspective that the ball is not yet on the baseline. So this is what you should be seeing from your side when you're hitting the ball and you know, okay, this is a good ball. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that there's very little space between the ball and the baseline, so it looks very scary. So what's important to know is what you saw from the other side perspective is that the ball is not yet on the baseline. There's still some space, and that this is the shot you need to look for. I also mentioned before that you might not be trusting gravity fully. So what I mean by that is that you might try to do all the work to bring the ball in the court. And so you might do that in two ways. You might try and play the ball very low above the net, or you might try and put excessive spin on the ball. But you probably noticed that both of these shots were fairly short again, so not deep enough to prevent your opponent from attacking. So when you do trust gravity, it actually means that you're playing higher and you put some topspin on the ball, but not excessive topspin. And you do trust that gravity is going to bring the ball down just before the baseline. And so at first it might look scary because from this perspective it seems that the ball is almost on the baseline, but as you saw before, there's still some space between the ball and the baseline, even though it seems it's almost on the baseline. And so I'm going to hit a few shots now, and I'm going to ask you later if you would play the ball the same way as I did, or would you aim lower? Now I'd like you to play a little game with me, and the game is called How High Would You Play? So I'm gonna go and freeze a shot like this, and I'm gonna ask you at what height would you play this ball back? Let's go one more time in slow motion, and I'm gonna give you 3 windows. Would you hit this ball through window 1, 2 or 3? So think about it and make your choice. So what may be surprising to you is that the ball actually goes above the window 3. So now my question is, do you think this ball will land in the court or not? And yes, the ball lands in the court. So let's move to another stroke. Here's another forehand that's nice and easy and comfortable. At what height would you play this forehand? And you have to decide quite early. Would you play this in window 1, 2 or 3? And the ball actually goes through window 3 and it does land inside the baseline. So let's just move on to the next one, this backhand. So make your choice. At what height would you play this ball? 1, 2 or 3 to make it land deep. And as you can see, it also goes through window 3. So what may be surprising to you is that you can play the ball quite high above the net with good speed and no excessive spin, and yet the ball will still land in the court. The reason why I'm making this video is because in my experience with juniors and recreational tennis players, I often see that they do not believe that you can play so high above the net with such speed of the ball and still keep the ball in the court. And because they don't believe, they never attempt shots with good height and speed that make the ball land really deep and still have good pace. That's why I recommend that you experiment with the 3 key ball controls: height, speed and spin. Vary these 3 ball controls and figure out at what height, speed and spin you need to hit the ball in order to make it land in the last quarter of opponent's court. The challenge of tennis is in the fact that every ball you receive from your opponent is different, and that for every stroke you make, you need to calculate at what height, speed and spin you need to hit it in order to make it land very deep. One more tip. You need to know the 3 ball controls, height, speed and spin, as early as possible, ideally even before the ball bounces on your side. So what are the benefits of hitting such a deep ball when you play points? A deep ball makes it very difficult for your opponent to see it clearly after the bounce, and therefore time it well, especially if they like to play close to the baseline and don't like to move back. Because of that, they might simply make an outright error, or they might slightly mishit the ball, which will result in a short ball that you can attack. So here's another example of a very deep shot that forces a short reply because of a slight mishit, and that gives me a chance to attack and finish the point. Just make sure that you keep practicing, because not every attempt that you make is gonna land in the court. Have fun.